All right, I had an interruption and also a technology failure, so I'm going to try to jump back into this video. So what God is enacting now is a repetition of what he did previously with that northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom, he sent the king of Assyria. The southern kingdom, he sent the king of Babylon. And these are the rods that he used in order to punish. Now, God started speaking to me about a year ago about the king of Assyria and the king of Babylon. And because they were two different kings, it was kind of difficult to understand what it was that he was saying or building me to understand. He was concurrently speaking with me about these Islamic nations. I had originally said Arab nations, but they're not all Arab. And so I made the correction that these are actually Islamic nations. Iran is not an Arab nation. And that Islam has become this scapegoat and this by which Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism have created a delusion. And this delusion has infected the kingdom of the Antichrist, of which Zionism has largely constructed the narrative that they go by. Now, what he was teaching me, I wasn't entirely wrong about what it was that he was teaching me, but he needed to build me to a certain point to understand how that delusion factors in. The persecuting power, we know that the persecuting power of the end is not Islamic nations. And if you just look with common sense at the way that Islamic nations speak versus the way that counterfeit Israel, the so-called most moral chosen nation, speaks, you can see the arrogance, you can see the evil, the entitlement, the absolute opposite of everything that God has commanded us to be. You can see that in this nation calling itself chosen. And what I have heard and what I have felt is humility and restraint on the part of those who have been demonized and scapegoated to be terrorists. Now, more recently, God has brought me back to this because I've been grieving with him and telling him, look, you had me speak these things and I don't have any ability to fulfill them, but I am required to speak what you tell me to speak, even though I don't have the ability to fulfill what I speak. And so if you're going to have me speak it, then I'm going to go back to you to complain when you don't fulfill it, when you're not fulfilling it. And so as I've been reading and listening to that series that I did, and going back to understand the king of Assyria in the fulfillment of these end times, of what God is doing, I continue to go back to him and say, this sounds a lot like counterfeit Israel. It sounds a lot like counterfeit Israel. So why did you have me talking about these Islamic nations? To be sure, there is going to be war with the Islamic nations, but that war and the persecuting power that is going to be executing this and is going to be responsible for it is Israel. It's not terrorists coming against them. It's them provoking. And it is the false prophet of the United States provoking. So recently, Max Blumenthal was reporting that he had made a trip to Iran. Imagine that. Max Blumenthal, a Jew, totally safe in Iran, to go and have a meeting with the president, with President Pezeshkian, I think is how you say his name, in Iran, in which the president is telling these reporters, I want to speak with you, American reporters, and let you know that war is at the door. We are going to go to war. But I want to tell you why. We tried to negotiate. We tried to work for peace, but America and Israel have made it clear that that is not their goal. So we are not going to continue in fruitless negotiations. So what I have told you regarding going to war is true. And I never once implied that these would be the persecuting powers. So I want to make sure that you continue to understand that these are not the persecuting powers. Whatever they do has been provoked. If that is not clear to you yet, I don't know what to tell you, except go and make it clear. Go get clear with God. Because the word tells us in Revelation 13 that the false prophet and the image of the Antichrist, United States and counterfeit Israel, those are the persecuting powers of the end, particularly counterfeit Israel. Now, the confusing part for me in Scripture, so all of these things will happen, as I said to you, in those videos. But the confusing part for me, as I mentioned, was the separation of the king of Assyria and the king of Babylon. And so I was understanding that the king of Assyria is a separate king, and it's not. The king of Assyria actually is counterfeit Israel, is this image of the Antichrist. I did tell you in those other videos that this was going to happen, that the king of Assyria would shave down a remnant prior to Babylon rising and that fifth trumpet being blown, and that absolutely has been happening. Now, let me tell you how it's been happening. First of all, the book of Isaiah says, shall I not, or God says in the book of Isaiah, shall I not deal with Jerusalem as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? What is Samaria? That northern kingdom that I've likened the people of Gaza and Palestine to. That was the sin. Samaria was the sin of that northern kingdom, that they turned to different religion. You cannot look at things that happen in the world, even as grievous as they are, and as much as you don't want to blame anybody, you cannot look at the things that are happening in the world or in your own life and say that someone else has brought them, or that someone else is sovereign over them. God is sovereign over all. So you have to understand that this has been judgment that God has brought on them. Does that mean that the people who are bringing judgment are good? Are instruments of God, are good instruments of God? No, they're instruments of God, but they are not good instruments of God. They are people destined for destruction. And when God is done using that rod of Assyria, that rod of Babylon, he will destroy them. He is going to destroy them. They will not be saved. Now, let me explain to you the difference in language. But let me first tell you, I have said to you many times on these videos that if you think that what's going on in Gaza does not affect you, you are wrong. You are absolutely wrong. Because Gaza has been a sign to you of what's going to happen to you. It has also been something to test your heart, to shave you down as to whether you belong in the remnant or outside. How does that happen? I've already explained to you that God shaves down his people through hardening. And so if what you've thought is, oh, sucks to be them, but I'm glad I'm okay, you don't speak out, you don't warn people, you don't do anything to help, you'll be shaved down. You're not in the covenant. The covenant, God has clearly indicated that you must care for the poor, the oppressed, the fatherless, the widow. These people are being oppressed. And we don't get to turn and say, well, that's God, that's judgment that God has brought on them. If we're actually working out our own covenant, then we know that God brings judgment on everybody, including ourselves. So wouldn't you be concerned for them? Pray for them? Hope to be able to share what God has so freely given to you? What he has taught you? To go out and teach transgressors? To teach others what's going on in the times we're living in? You can't walk away from that. You'll be shaved off. So that the narrative that you believe in your heart, the gospel that you have accepted into your heart, the doctrine that is coming out of your heart in your deeds, your thoughts, your beliefs, and the way that you speak, this is what has marked you. If you have a counterfeit Christian narrative that does not come from the Bible, we know what's in your heart. If you are able to have attitudes like finish them, we know what's in your heart. You are destined for destruction. I promise you that. You are destined for destruction. The king of Assyria and Babylon are both counterfeit Israel. Now, here's one thing that does distinguish between Assyria and Babylon. Historically, you see that the United States has been supporting the image of the Antichrist. And so this here is a system of Assyria that has persecuted figurative Samaria. They have been coming against these different nations, and they will continue to do so. The book of Daniel in chapter 11 tells us that the Antichrist is going to continue to seize lands, and that it will be successful until the time of the end. So any political commentators telling you that Israel's done and the United States is done, the United States, to be sure, is no longer going to be the global superpower, but it will have power. Because it's going to assist counterfeit Israel, and it's going to actually at some point be fighting with counterfeit Israel, according to Daniel 11. That's been the system of Assyria. But there is something that's going to rise in Babylon, and we need to define what Babylon is. Revelation 17 talks about Babylon the Great and the prostitutes that bore out of her. It also talks about 10 horns. It talks about a seventh kingdom that in Revelation 13 we discover is the false prophet. And it also talks about an eighth king that in Revelation 13 we discover is the image of the Antichrist. Let me define Babylon. Babylon the Great, the prostitutes that bore out of her, that continue in her prostitutions. So counterfeit Christianity, all these things you've been calling churches your whole life, that is part of the Antichrist. That right there, those marketplaces, those businesses, those tax exempt, sold out to the world, using images of the cross and pictures of Jesus and statues of Jesus and relics and nativities, that right there, got that from its harlot mother. That abomination. And it's not just counterfeit Christianity, it's also counterfeit Judaism. Where did they get Saturday from? Because that's a construction of the Romans. Why is it that that the word prophesies that they're going to lose his calendar, and now they're using language like Saturday? What the heck is that? No one knew what Saturday was in the Bible, but they knew how to count down days from a rest day, the new moon, the faithful witness in the sky, to then 6 working days, and then a rest day, and then 6 working days and a rest day. They knew how to do that. That calendar does not correlate to what those calling themselves Jews today are using. And the reason for that is found in the Word. Hosea 2:11 and Lamentations 2:6 tell you that they are going to lose God's calendar. God established a lunar calendar. A lunar calendar does not correlate to seasons. In Leviticus 23, you see that he has date-specific holy days and he has season-specific holy days. Because dates don't correlate to seasons, which means Passover does not occur in spring every year. It has occurred in spring at certain years, but not every year. It makes its trip all across the lunar calendar. But that's not what these people calling themselves Jews are practicing, is it? They have added days and leap years, etc., in order to prostitute themselves to the Romans. They got Saturday, that is a prostitution to the Romans. They say things like, oh, we light the candles of Shabbat. Excuse me, in Exodus it says don't light a fire on the Sabbath. What do you mean God commanded you to light the candles of Shabbat? They prostitute themselves to rabbinical commentary. You remember that Jesus said, do not call anyone rabbi, I am your teacher? A lot of you on this channel are following that. Do you remember that Paul said that you are not to get your gospel from them, that they are enemies as far as the gospel is concerned? Why would you go and get your gospel from people who haven't accepted Christ? If you haven't accepted Christ, you don't have the Holy Spirit. What wisdom do you have? And moreover, it says in Revelation 9 that they have as their breastplate iron. Iron has always meant Rome. That's their breastplate. Your breastplate, according to Paul in Ephesians, is supposed to be righteousness. But if you prostitute yourselves to them, what is your breastplate? Rome. You are of the Antichrist. Gaza is a sign to you of what you're going to go into. The king of Assyria is false Israel with the help of the false prophet. Babylon is the kingdom, the empire of the Antichrist. It includes Babylon the Great, the harlot Catholic Church, the prostitutes that bore out of her. They continue in her prostitutions to the world. The false prophet of the United States, who they gladly handed their power over to, the 10 horns that are described in Revelation 17, which are the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe. Let's just stop for a minute. Well, are they testifying? Are they testifying to the image of the Antichrist? Yeah, they've been involved in it. Western Europe, the false prophet of the United States. Western Europe that rose for 1 hour to fame, to power with the Antichrist. They sold out. And they have one purpose, as it says in Revelation 17, and that is to hand over their power and authority to the Antichrist. The Antichrist persecuting power of the end times, which is the 8th kingdom, and that is the image of the Antichrist, which is counterfeit Israel. Are the Arab nations going to factor in here? Yes. They are going to factor in because they are being used in part. Excuse me, I think I said Arab nations, and you know that I mean Islamic nations. Are they going to factor in there? Yes, because they are being used in order to trap these people in the delusion because they have not loved truth. That's what God said. That because you have not loved truth, I hand you over to a powerful delusion, a deception. This is not the entire deception, but it's part of it. And it is handed over to those who have not loved truth but had delighted in wickedness. That is Babylon. So this is the distinction between Babylon and Assyria in this end time, is that Babylon is something that is much bigger, that is going to continue to blossom into a very clear separation from the people of God. You're going to see what they're marked by their fruit. You're going to see that counterfeit garbage in their heart. That is the abomination of desolation. It is the image of the cross established by Rome. That is what they worship. They do not know God. Isaiah 7. Assyria is used as a razor of judgment, but those who remain in the land will eat curds and honey. You understand what that means? Those who remain in the land. This is why I've told you return to God. This is why I've told you start working out your covenant, and then you'll be taken care of. But you can't be taken care of if you're not in Zion, if you're not in the church. Revelation 12 says that the church is going to be taken care of for 3.5 years. Better start questioning. You better question quick, because the time is closing in, whether you're actually in that land. Verse 20, in that day the Lord will use a razor hired from beyond the Euphrates River, the king of Assyria, to shave your head and your private parts, and to cut off your beard also. In that day a person will keep alive a young cow and 2 goats. And because of the abundance of milk they give, there will be curds to eat. All who remain in the land will eat curds and honey. In that day, every place where there were 1,000 vines worth 1,000 silver shekels, there will be only briars and thorns. Hunters will go there with bow and arrow, for the land will be covered with briars and thorns. As for the hills once cultivated by the hoe, you will no longer go there, for fear of the briars and thorns. They will become places where cattle are turned loose and where sheep run. In Isaiah 8, it talks about the mighty floodwaters of Euphrates and how they're going to overflow your hiding place. Isaiah 10, he talks about the rod of his anger being used and then broken. So the king of Assyria has all of this arrogance, like, oh, we've done this by our own power. They're their own gods. But God is going to turn around and punish him. And you see that in Isaiah 14. He crushes the Assyrian, and the yoke is taken from the shoulders of the people of God. In Micah 5, Jesus will deliver from the Assyrian. Isaiah 31, Assyria will fall by no human sword. A sword not of mortals will devour them. They will flee before the sword, and their young men will be put to forced labor. Their stronghold will fail because of terror. At the sight of the battle standard, their commanders will panic, declares the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, whose furnace is in Jerusalem. People hate this system. I hate this system. I don't care what label you want to give me for that. I hate it. It is disgusting. It makes me sick. These are the people who are going to kill me, and I am not going to apologize for the way that I feel about that. I hate them. I hate what they're doing. It's sickening. And I know that God hates it too, because he intends on destroying it. And don't tell me that's not Christian, because God talks about hating evil, hating what's going on here. It makes me sick. It makes me sick every single day. I cannot stomach the images of children starving and struggling to take breaths. I can't stomach it. And the fact that this is being done in God's name, that they are claiming to do this in God's name, and that people support that narrative, makes me disgusted. It is detestable how stupidly wicked you have to be. How stupidly wicked you would have to be to believe that that is godly. There is no torture in God's word. There's no torture that is being enacted by godly people. That's not what happened. Nahum 1:14. The Lord has given a command concerning you, Nineveh. You will have no descendants to bear your name. I will destroy the images and the idols that are in the temple of your gods. I will prepare your grave, for you are vile. Vile. You think God's going to say, oh, I love them. I love them. No. They're vile. Chapter 3, verse 19. Nothing can heal you. Your wound is fatal. All who hear the news about you clap their hands at your fall, for who has not felt your endless cruelty? And I don't need to again mention to you all of the scriptures that I've read to you in Habakkuk and Micah about them stealing people's homes, about the torture of God's witnesses in Revelation 2 when talking to the church in Smyrna and warning them, don't be afraid of what you're about to suffer, but the devil's going to put you in prison for 10 days to test you. You know exactly what they're doing right now and what's going to be done to the witnesses when they are captured. You know exactly what's going to be done. And you know the persecuting powers. The predominant persecuting power is the image of Israel, the image of the Antichrist. And second to that is the false prophet of the United States. Both, we already know, torture their prisoners. Gouge out their eyes, saw them in two, burn them at the stake, feed them to wild animals. Listen to the testimonies of CIA whistleblowers and the many tactics that they use here in the United States. Waterboarding. Listen to the testimonies of IDF soldiers, of prisoners who were imprisoned in Israel. Listen to what they have to say. You think that rape and sodomy, all of these torture methods, you think that this is what God's people do? Do you remember that Jesus said that if his kingdom were of this world, that his people would fight? His servants would fight? So I said to you in previous videos that this was going to happen before that fifth trumpet blew. And as I've been taking this back with God, he has made it clear that this has been happening. This has been happening. And war between these nations has been happening. And war will continue. But that this image of the Antichrist is not only Assyria, it is also referred to as Babylon in the fulfillment of Scripture. Thank God we have passages like Nahum 3:19 and 1:14 where we can see what their fate is. Thank God we have passages like Revelation 3 when speaking to the church in Philadelphia, one of the bodies of believers, of the witnesses, in which we're told that these people calling themselves Jews, though they are not but are of the synagogue of Satan, that they are going to bow down at the feet of those who belong to God, and they are going to acknowledge that he has loved them. That there will be vindication, that these will not have descendants to bear their name, he will destroy them, and that we are going to take up a taunt against these people who have done these things. Now, I want you to understand something. Those people in Gaza, they're descended Jews. The majority of those living in that region are descended Jews. You should understand them to be likened to Samaria. They might be saved before you are. If you don't accept your cross and you don't return to God, you are going into the lake of burning fire. And those people will be saved at the second resurrection. And you will have forsaken everything. The razor of judgment has started. Sword, famine, wild beast, and plague. More plague is coming. More war is coming. Starvation is coming. Violence will increase. Look at what is happening. People are losing their jobs en masse. Food assistance is ending here in the United States. I just saw an article this morning that Target and Amazon are making thousands of layoffs. That ICE arrested a British Muslim journalist. Your free speech is going away. President Pezeshkian has already said that Iran is going to war. The GCC came together not that long ago to formulate what it is, how it is that they're going to move forward after the strikes on Qatar, and their final realization, and shame on them, because it shouldn't get to this point. They should have been defending Gaza. But their final realization that, this so-called security that we have with the United States isn't exactly secure. They thought they could join in on the fun. Under the protection of the United States, what they don't realize is the United States is not in power anymore. It's been invaded by a different power. And it is at the behest of that power. It does not make its own decisions, and it is not able to even protect itself. Things are going to get bad. Go discern what you need to be doing.